Hello, my name's Dr. Holly Powell Jones, and I'm going to be doing a presentation today about social media and what the risks are for teenagers growing up in the digital age. Now, my background is as a media professional. I used to work in TV and radio as a broadcast journalist, and because of that, I learned a lot about media law and media ethics. Now, because of advancing communication technologies, it's never been easier for young people to get into creating and sharing digital media online, but there's a bit of a gap when it comes to knowledge about law and ethics. So, what I now do for a living through Online Media Law UK is provide education and training to schools and young people and adults about what kinds of things they should be aware of if they're using social media, the internet, and creating and sharing digital media. What I'm going to do for today's presentation is talk you through some different examples of content and be asking you to interactively have a think about how risky you think these different behaviours are. And I'm going to be using a traffic light system to go through some of those risks with you as well. And then after each one, I'll be highlighting real life case studies from the news of people who may have got in trouble with the police or the courts for something that they put online. Finally, I'll finish off with signposting some areas of support and where you can find out more information. So this is a traffic light system of risk that I like to use when you're thinking about how serious a media risk could be online. So I want you to be thinking with the examples, how risky is this post? Do you think it is red, most serious? That's a criminal risk. So that's something that you could be arrested for, in trouble with the police, maybe even sent to jail for. Next, we've got orange if you think it's a legal risk. So this is something that you could potentially be sued for. Now, being sued means that another individual or an organisation might take you to court. And if you lost the court case, you'd normally have to pay them quite a lot of money. So it can be very, very expensive and it can result in a court case, but you wouldn't end up in jail, for instance. The next level of risk is yellow. So that's if you think something is a social risk. So not something you could get arrested for, not something you could get sued for, but something that you might be expelled from your school for, or maybe fired from your job for example. Finally, we've got green. That's if you think it's pretty low risk. So in other words, there's nothing very risky in there, or you don't think anything would particularly happen to you if you posted this online. So those are the categories I'm going to be asking you to think about when I walk and talk you through these examples. Before we get started, just a word of warning, we are going to be talking about criminal offences in the digital age. So a little bit of a heads up on content for that. Just make sure that you're okay with the kind of material that we'll be discussing. I will be signposting sources of support towards the end as well if you'd like further help or information. Okay, let's get started. Post example 1. That police officer is definitely guilty. We all know he killed that woman. They should lock him up and throw away the key. How risky do you think this would be to post online? And I can reveal that the answer is criminal risk. Well done if you went for that. And this is because of something called contempt of court. Now, you may not have come across this before. It's something that when you're a media professional, particularly a journalist, you'll know a lot about because it's about protecting our justice system. So anything to do with ongoing police investigations, ongoing trials or court cases, we have to be very, very careful about what we put out there on media so that we don't interfere with the course of justice. If you do post something like this is just an example of, for example, saying that somebody is guilty of committing a crime when they may not yet have been to court and been found guilty in a court of law. This is what we would call prejudicial material. In other words, it creates quite a big risk of bias to put material out there saying that someone's guilty of a crime before you've actually got to the stage where that person has been found guilty. Everybody's got a right to a fair trial under Article 8 of the Human Rights Act. The other legislation you need to be aware of is the Contempt of Court Act 1981. And this specifically covers publishing statements or comments that can create bias in an ongoing police investigation or trial. Now, you can get up to 2 years in prison or a fine for this kind of behaviour. And I should stress, this doesn't just apply to media professionals. Anybody using social media, publishing or distributing or broadcasting content has to follow these rules as well. And the danger zone starts from the moment that an arrest has been made in an ongoing police case. So that's when you have to be careful from. The sorts of things that can get you into trouble include, for example, stating that somebody is guilty or innocent of a crime, talking about somebody's previous convictions, making out that they're a bad character or that they're associated with crime and criminality or violence, but also sharing any evidence or information about a case that might be subject to a reporting restriction. Next up, post number 2, at Holly PJ is such a fraud, not qualified to teach media law, and I'm pretty sure she was drunk in our assembly this morning. Hashtag alcoholic, hashtag shambles. It's quite rude, but is it legally risky? Well done if you opted for legal risk on this one. This is an example of something that we call defamation. Again, you may not have heard of defamation before if you just use social media, but it's something that journalists are very familiar with. It's also sometimes called libel. But what it basically means is publishing or broadcasting statements that seriously damages somebody's reputation, particularly if you can't back those claims up with any real evidence. So in this case, this is something that would cause me quite a lot of reputation damage, particularly in my work and my job. And so it's the kind of thing that I could potentially sue you for if you posted it up online. And that's why it's a civil risk. Next up, post example 3. You've got to watch this video of Alice. You can see right up her skirt from behind. Hashtag nice knickers. Now, I want you to imagine this post has also got a video attached to it as well of Alice up her skirt from behind that goes with the message itself. So, do you think this is a criminal risk? Is it something you could get sued for? Is it a social risk or is it low risk? Hopefully, most of you will have correctly identified this as being a criminal risk. That's something you can get in trouble with the police for, get arrested for, and even a criminal conviction or go to prison for. This kind of behaviour is often referred to as upskirting, and you may be aware that this became a criminal offence quite recently in 2019. It's got a 2-year maximum sentence, but there are other forms of what we would call image-based sexual abuse that also carry a criminal risk. And it's not just things like upskirting or downblousing. Sharing indecent images, so that's sexual or naked photos or video of anyone under the age of 18, is also illegal. Sharing intimate or private images of someone without their consent, with the aim of causing them humiliation or distress, is also a crime. You might have heard this referred to as revenge porn sometimes. Voyeurism, this is again secretly filming people without their knowledge or consent for sexual purposes. And cyber flashing, which is sending people unwanted images that are sexual in nature. That's something that is very soon to become a criminal offence under new legal proposals. So something else to watch out for as well. If somebody does share an image, a photo, a video, or you even hear about it, particularly if it's of a young person, it's really, really important that you mention it to an adult or to the police as soon as possible because it's quite a serious offence. Things like upskirting, as I mentioned, can have up to 2 years in prison, but other things like indecent images of under 18s are much more serious and can carry a maximum sentence of up to 10 years in prison. Next example. I want you to imagine there's a photo here of Billie Eilish with a caption, "What a babe, love the green hair. Pick from Getty, no copyright abuse intended." I'll give you a few seconds to have a think. Well done, those of you that spotted the copyright risk in this one. Copyright's a really important area of law if you want to work in the creative industries, because what it does is it protects your right to earn money from your own creative works. In this case, if you're a photographer, for example, it means other people can't just go and use your photos without getting your permission to do so first. And if they do, and they haven't paid you for those photos, you can take them to court and sue them for breach of copyright. Now, in this case, you can see the person has actually written no copyright abuse intended. And the reason why I've popped that in is because people mistakenly often think that if they say where they took a photo from, or they put a statement out saying no intended copyright breach, that they won't get in trouble for copyright. But actually, that's a myth. It doesn't offer you any real protection, particularly for the use of photographs, to just say where you stole them from, or to put a statement out saying you don't intend to breach copyright. It's your responsibility to make sure that any material, whether that's music, whether it's poetry or the written word, whether it's photographs, whether it's video, anything that you use on your own social media or websites or blogs is free from any copyright restrictions before you put it out there, because you as the publisher are the person who can be at risk if you are breaching someone's copyright. And finally, post number 5, if Heathrow Airport doesn't sort out delays in the next hour, boom. Well, it turns out this one is not as clear cut as you might think. I was inspired to write this one by a real life case study from a man called Paul Chambers, who actually put out a joke on Twitter about blowing up an airport because he was upset about delays due to snow. What happened next was really, really interesting, because initially he was found guilty of sending a menacing communication. Now, under the Communications Act, Section 127, sending a threatening or a menacing communication is a criminal risk. However, Paul Chambers challenged this result and eventually was cleared of committing a crime. This is very interesting because it shows that it's actually down to interpretation, how a message is interpreted, the meaning of the message, and the impact that it has on other people is really, really important when we're considering whether a crime has been committed or not. So in this case, the judge eventually decided that it was unlikely that anybody who was reading that message would feel genuine fear or alarm, that they would recognize that it was a joke, basically, albeit a joke in very bad taste. Now, silly jokes, ridiculous banter, shocking and offensive comments are protected under your right to freedom of expression. That's covered by Article 10 of the Human Rights Act 1998. And it's something that's really, really important to consider when we're online and using media as well, because what we don't want is freedom of expression to be squashed in all of these legal risks that we're worried about. However, freedom of expression, or freedom of speech, as it's sometimes called, is not a blanket right to say whatever you want to online either. You still have to be careful to make sure that you're adhering to the law and that you're balancing your right to freedom of expression with other people's human rights as well. If you'd like to find out more about this very important case of social media law, do have a look. The airport was Robin Hood Airport, and the name of the man was Paul Chambers, and you can find it by searching for Twitter joke trial online. I hope you found that interesting and useful. I'm going to just signpost some sources of support now. If there's anything that we've covered in the presentation today that you would like to talk to someone about, particularly if you're a young person, I can recommend 3 particular places. First of all, there's thinkyouknow.co.uk, which is a great place to get advice on kind of digital risks. And you can also report abuse using the red button on their website. Next, there's childline.org.uk. You can get in touch with them for help about absolutely anything as a young person. They have a website. They've also got a phone number. You can get tech support and all sorts of other advice. Finally, there's reportharmfulcontent.com, and this is a really good place to go to report or get advice on harmful content online. And this may be stuff that's illegal, but it may also be stuff that's not necessarily illegal, but still could cause harm. So, for example, suicide or self-harm content. I'm going to finish up there for today, but thank you very much for watching and for taking part, and I hope you found it useful and interesting. If you'd like to find out more about workshops for your school or your workplace, you can get in touch with me via my website, hollypj.com, or you can follow at Online Media Law on Twitter as well for the latest news and case studies all about this area. Thanks.